Okay, so today I'm going to be doing a book recommendations video. I tried to stick with books that were under 400 pages. I think one of the books I chose actually is over 400 pages, but the rest are right around 350 or less. I also did not choose any books that are super popular or books that are talked about very often. I may have seen a couple of these talked about once or twice, but that's pretty much it. So the first book that I would recommend is called Ocean on Top by Hal Clement. It is a science fiction novella. It's 141 pages. And this is a future in which there is an energy crisis. And all of the power plants in the world are plugged into a central network and being rationed by an energy board. And they have their own team of investigators and sort of police. I won't get super into the plot of the book because, to tell you the truth, I thought the plot was a bit mediocre and the ending was a little anticlimactic. However, the reason that you want to read this is because of the imaginative technology in this book. There is about a city of about, or a small town of about 15,000 people living at the bottom of the ocean, and they live there permanently. And they have developed some extremely interesting technology to survive down there. And so if you're looking for something really different, really creative, really imaginative, this would be a really good book to locate. I don't know how much luck you will have finding it. I picked it up used at Half Price Books for $3. So, but it's definitely worth looking for. Yeah, if you want something different and you're a science fiction fan, it was really good for that. The next book was written by an independent author. It's called Amanujaku, and it's by Damien Lutz. This is also science fiction, and it is set in the future, a dystopian future. And this is our main character, Andre. Andre has had an extremely troubled life. He is very criminally minded. He is not a good guy at all, and I really hated his guts. And he comes into contact with an android. Androids are very commonplace. Lots of people have androids, and all the androids are hooked up to a central net, and they are very closely monitored. But some of them have developed emotions, but their emotions are regulated and controlled by the central net. But this android in particular has figured out a way to break free from the net while still being hooked up to the net. And she's trying to make an escape. And Andre comes into contact with her. And this book is, I loved this book so much because of the human nature that is being exhibited here. This author has a really, really strong grasp on human nature. I thought he seemed very intuitive. His writing is very intuitive. The characters are absolutely so well realized. It's just so good. I couldn't even express how amazing I thought the character work was in this book. And the story itself is very, very good as well. And there are several sort of more action-oriented scenes, and there is enough plot to keep you entertained. But I personally really liked the character work here. The next one I would recommend is The Test by, and I'm not sure how this author pronounces his name, Sylvain Neuvel. It's 105 pages, and it is about a man and his family trying to immigrate to the United Kingdom and become citizens. And all it takes is for the male in the family to become a citizen, and then his whole family will be citizens of the UK. While he is taking this test, it turns out to not be exactly what he expected it to be, and I won't say anything else about that because it is very short, and it is absolutely 100% amazing. The ending blows your mind. My mind was completely blown at the end of this book. It was not at all what I was expecting. It was absolutely incredible, and it was very well written, and I'm a huge fan of this novella, so highly recommend. The next book I would recommend is A Princess of Mars by John Carter. This was actually published originally in 1912. However, it does read a little bit in a dated way. Like, it has the same feel as like if you were reading like maybe Frankenstein, only not quite as well written as Frankenstein, but it has that same sort of feel to it. And it is about a man who is a retired Confederate soldier, and he finds a cave one day and is somehow transported to Mars, whilst his body still existing on Earth. So he's in two places, occupying two places at once. And this author's portrayal of Mars was incredible. On Mars, he finds two ancient species. The planet is dying, and they have a machine that is helping to produce atmosphere because Mars is losing its atmosphere. They have technology that is very unusual, and for the day in which this was written was extremely amazing. It is not really science fiction so much as science fantasy, because a lot of physics was either not known at the time or just disregarded. However, it is a really good time. John Carter, now of course this is not the reality, but on Mars, because the gravity is so much is so much lighter there, he is incredibly powerful there, incredibly strong. He can jump incredibly high. He just has a lot of advantages. He's kind of like a superhero in a way. But yeah, I thought it's all about his adventures on Mars and the life he ends up building there. And I thought it was so, so good, and it was so much fun. I just really, really loved it. And I would recommend this to people who like science fiction or who like superhero stories. Not that it's really too much like a superhero, but it is reminiscent of a superhero story. And who like some adventures, who like to see unusual places and peoples. The next book I would recommend is horror. It is called The Last Days of Jack Sparks by Jason Arnott. I thought this book was excellent. It was so much fun. This book is supposed to be a novel written by a man who has died. And what we're reading is his manuscript. and the manuscript is in first person, and it has been published by his brother. And his brother does add some footnotes to the manuscript, which if you don't like footnotes, I don't think the footnotes in this one will bother you, because they have been integrated as part of the story. They're not like your typical explanations of things and places. They're essentially like the brother's commentary that he's interjected after the fact. And Jack Sparks is a terrible, terrible human being. You absolutely dislike him, but he's a main character that you love to dislike. So there is just a small amount of body horror in here, not a whole lot. There's some supernatural happening. There is science fiction-esque event. I don't know how else to describe that, even though it's not really science fiction. And there is quite a bit going on in this book, and it was so much fun, and I would absolutely recommend this to people who like horror. This novel is also in the horror category. It's called The Anomaly by Michael Rudker. I have not seen anybody talk about this book, but I saw it somewhere, I don't remember where, and I thought it sounded excellent, and so I bought it, and I was not disappointed. This book is about a group of people who are YouTube creators. They have a YouTube channel, and the main character is a journalist who investigates supernatural and mythological legends. And he's not really an archaeologist, but he's kind of taking on like a faux archaeologist role, like pseudo-archaeology. And he investigates these things, and they usually come to nothing, but they make really good videos for his audience. And they go to they're investigating this cave that there's a lot of legend around. And the cave turns out to be an actual, there was actual fact based in this legend. And I won't tell you about what happens, of course, but it was it had definite horror elements in it. And there was a lot of, because they're in this cave system, it was a little bit claustrophobic feeling pretty regularly. But my favorite thing about this was, and they're trying to figure out what this cave is, as a matter of fact. I forgot to say that. But my favorite thing were the characters. There's about 5 characters in here, and the way these characters' personalities interact, I absolutely loved. I thought that was the best part of the book, in my opinion. Of course, I'm always on the lookout for characters. I'm always more interested in the characters of a book, usually, than I am the plot itself. But yeah, my favorite thing about this were the characters. They are incredibly funny and snarky, and they were really good. And the ending was fantastic. I really loved this book. One more thing that I liked about it is throughout the book you see little excerpts from the main character's file on these places. For example, it says, "From the files of Nolan Moore, Newspaper Rock, Utah. Detail." And this is like a photograph of the rock that is related to the cave that they're investigating. And there are also like newspaper clippings. I didn't come across one as I was flipping. I probably should have marked this book before I started talking, but you know, I hardly ever prepare. But there are also articles and scientific papers and things like that sprinkled throughout the book. So I really, really enjoyed that book. And this actually also has a sequel called The Possession, and I do have that book. I just haven't read it yet, but I am excited to read it. The next book is a nonfiction called The Hot Zone by Richard Preston. This book is about, just like the tagline here says, the terrifying true story of the origins of the Ebola virus. And this book was incredible. Oh, it was so good. It is completely and totally nonfiction, but it reads as if it were a fiction novel. So he really ties in all the individual accounts and the information very, very nicely. It just flows really well. And everything in here is factual. He bases them on written interviews that he's read. And in most cases, he has interviewed these people himself. And anytime he is extrapolating, he is sure to say, you know, so-and-so must have felt this way, or so-and-so must have thought this, so that you don't get confused about what was being said to him by the person and what he is extrapolating. But yeah, this was an amazing book. I absolutely recommend this. I think even if you are not a nonfiction reader, you can enjoy this book. Horror readers, mystery readers, nonfiction readers, general fiction readers. I just really thought that this would appeal to a wide variety of readers. The next book I would recommend is also nonfiction, and it's The Magnolia Story by Chip and Joanna Gaines. I was a huge fan of that show Fixer Upper. I really love home design, even though I'm terrible at it. I really love interior design and decor and all that kind of thing. And so I go through phases where I get kind of obsessed with it. And that Fixer Upper was like my favorite show. I just loved it so much, and I loved the interactions between Chip and Joanna Gaines. It was such a good show. But anyways, it's essentially their story about how they met after they got married and how they ended up doing Fixer Upper, the show, and the start of their Magnolia. I want to call it an empire. It's not really an empire, but it's essentially like a mini empire. They have a lot going on now. But at the time they wrote this book, they were big, but they weren't as big as they are now. But it was really, really super funny. Even if you're not a Chip and Joanna Gaines fan, I think that you could enjoy this book because their interactions are hilarious. And the stories that they tell in here, oh, fantastic. It was just so good. I really, really enjoyed it. The next book that I'll recommend is fiction. And it is called The Necrophiliac by Gabrielle Whitcop, and the translator was Dawn Bapst. And this book is only going to be for certain people, because when I bought this book, I thought the title was a metaphor for something, and it is not. It is not a metaphor. The character in the book, we are essentially reading his journal entries, and he is a necrophiliac, and he talks about corpses that he interacts with, and he does interact with them in the inappropriate ways that you would think and that I'm not going to say. It is not for the faint of heart. This book is kind of hardcore. So if you are not a person who can tolerate having a detailed account of this subject matter, you don't want to read this. But if you can tolerate it, it's absolutely worth reading. Even though the subject matter is grotesque, the writing is absolutely beautiful. This guy who translated this book did a fantastic job, I thought. I don't know what the original French version is like, but this English version is beautiful. The writing is just absolutely incredibly beautiful. And I just had such a mixed bag of emotions when I was reading this book. The subject matter is disturbing. but it was written so beautifully because the narrator, he is a necrophiliac, but he's very like poetic and he's romantic and he has all these beautiful thoughts, and they're all centered around dead people. It's really insane. And I just walked away from this book being sort of mind blown at how what an experience this was. It was just, oh, it was crazy. And I really, really enjoyed it. It was such a good read. And there's so much here to discuss. If you read this with a friend, I think that would be the best way because there's so much to talk about. It's 99 pages long. Is it 99 pages? Oh, it's 91 pages long. Excuse me, 91 pages long. And there is so much to discuss in this book. So I definitely recommend that to people who can tolerate this sort of thing. The next book I would recommend is The Death of Mrs Westaway by Ruth Ware. I have not heard this book talked about a lot. I think I saw one booktuber talk about it, which is why I picked it up. And I loved it. It's very slow paced and it is a mystery. And there's a little bit of thrillery happening at the end, but there is just not, it's more mystery than anything, really. And I thought it was very beautifully written. I loved the writing in this book. I thought it was wonderful. And I loved the main character, Hal. I thought she was extremely relatable, and your heart just really breaks for her. I mean, I got sniffled up for this poor girl in the beginning of the book and had to stop reading for a moment and just kind of write out my feelings in my book journal before carrying on. So I really, really greatly enjoyed this book. If you don't mind a slower paced book and aren't expecting, the climax was good, don't get me wrong. The ending was excellent. The ending was very, very satisfying, very satisfying. But it was just really slow paced. And if you're looking for something that's really going to keep you going, it's not going to be for you, really. But if you do like slower paced mystery, definitely this is an excellent read. Okay, that's all my book recommendations. I hope that maybe I've helped some of you find a good book. And do let me know if you decide to pick up any of these. I would love to hear that you're picking something up, and you can even come back and tell me what you thought about it. I would love that.